Thanks to Sana Skin Studio for supporting the No podcast. Sana is a skin studio that is shifting the relationship with your skin and your products through goal-driven facials, real guidance, and clean skincare. Stay tuned for our promo code so you can receive $25 off of your first facial at Sana Skin Studio. Welcome to the No podcast with me, Nikki Spo. You guys, welcome to my show, The No with Nikki Spo. I am so excited that you're here, and today we are talking about pivoting and more pivoting. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I thought I would have everything figured out by the time I was an adult, and I thought that I'd land in a predictable career and build a family, and that I would just finally arrive in life. Well, I'm an adult. And I must say that there have been so many times in my adulthood when I did not know what I wanted to do or how to get to the next benchmark in my life, which is why I'm so excited to bring my longtime friend to the show today, Joelle Ashley Barshan. Joelle has been a rising star all of her life. She was made for the stage. I'm telling you, this girl was made for the stage. She's a triple threat, a singer, dancer, and an actress. And I first came to meet her when I came on board as her choreographer for stage performances. And fast forward, our lives kind of took their own turns. She continued to pursue her career in entertainment, which she has had great success in, and I moved into teaching and became a mom. After years of staying in touch mostly on social media, we learned that the other is living a sober life. Been able to really reconnect and form a new, deeper kind of life bond through our sobriety. Recently in 2020, Joelle's father passed away. If you follow my IG, you probably know how close I am with my own dad. And for as long as I've known Joelle, I knew that her father was her number one person too. Since his passing, she took over his business, Transitions Recovery Center, having little to no experience running a business whatsoever. So today we are going to talk about what it was like for her to essentially go from living life with limitless opportunities and luxuries with her parents' support to what it was like for her to literally learn how to, quote, adult, right? So without further ado, I want to welcome the shining star that is Joelle Ashley Barshan. Joelle.
Nikki.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the No with me, Nikki Spo.
I can't believe I'm so excited to be here with you.
I love you so much, and I'm just so happy that we're finally doing this.
I love you so much too. Me too. I feel like for months, probably a year, I've been saying hey, let's do it. I'm so happy.
I know we're finally here. It's amazing. I can't wait. So, all right. So you grew up at 37.
Basically, yeah, I grew up at 37.
Yeah, tell me about that.
My life was really easy. I literally did whatever I want. I had a career in music, not because I wanted to. If I didn't want to show up, I did. It was very much whatever I wanted to do. Oh, I wanted to act. I went to acting school for 2 years. Whatever I wanted to do. Didn't worry about any finances. I mean, I had an apartment in New York, an apartment in LA. Didn't know what taxes were. I mean, I literally didn't know what a budget was. Oh, I want a car. What car do you want? My life was so easy. And I'm not saying that to brag, but when my dad passed away and my life changed and everything got ripped up from underneath me, I mean, I had to go to work every day, and show up and be responsible for people. So, it was a huge, I had to grow up literally in the matter of 5 seconds.
When I hear your story, I'm in some level, I think I knew that about you back then, right? However many years ago that was, that you didn't have to work and you could pursue this entertainment, but it was very foreign to me. So I had no, it's almost like we were living completely opposite lives in a sense, right? You probably were what do you mean you have to work? And I'm what do you mean you don't have to work? It was completely foreign. I'm I could not possibly imagine a life like that. And here you are, you're telling me this. And I want to reiterate the fact that you're not here to brag about this, because I know you, Joelle, and I know your soul, and I know who you are. And I don't think that money or the way anybody grows up has anything to do with the type of human being a person can become, who they are in their soul. So like the way, if you just write these words on paper, it sounds very entitled, right?
Totally.
But
It's
like, I don't
embarrassing
know
to
you to be that
say
way.
it. It's embarrassing to even say it, but
But
it's true.
here's the part is like, you're actually fucking saying it. Like, how many people don't say it? Like, you're like, hold on, wait a second. I've had a silver spoon in my mouth all these years. Like, and that's why I don't know how to do XYZ things.
I literally didn't know, like I mean, it's a totally different line of work that I'm doing, but even just paying my own bills, like I always paid my rent and stuff like that. But like, it's not, I still worked hard. Don't get me wrong. I still worked hard. I loved what I did, but it was like, like how you said, like, I would never understand, oh, what do you mean you have to work? And it's not like I'm not saying, I know my parents did the best they could. I know my dad, they wanted me to have everything, but like it was very handicapping at the same time because, when at 37, I'm like, wait, now what? I don't even know what to do. And still some days today, I'm like, I have no, but I go in there and I'm like, I'm going to do this. No, I pray about it. I ask for help and I just figure it out.
Okay, tell us what transitions is.
Okay, so my dad started Transitions Recovery Program 35 years ago so my dad was a cop initially, and he served in South Miami. And make a long story short, after struggling with some addiction issues of his own, he went to treatment and was working in treatment and then had an opportunity to start his own place. And, back then he was probably one of the only places in the country, maybe four other places. So, my dad was a good man, very like, he took insurance, which, how insurance goes. It's like they give you this, you can only do this, whatever. But my dad used to keep the patients, and he got in trouble for this because, when it comes to treatment, okay, so Transitions is a substance abuse mental health treatment facility. And, it's a dual diagnosis. We can treat mental health, substance abuse, both, either or. And, it's a process getting treatment with substance abuse. So people, by the time they got it's residential, it starts at residential. So they would go to detox first. And by the time they got to us, they would just be getting, a little bit less fuzzy. But, the insurance companies would only let us have like 30 days or whatever. And my dad would just keep people. And he would just say, like, listen, the insurance wasn't paying him, but he would keep them because he was like, you're not ready yet. Like, I want you to come here and not have to come back. So, and he continued to live like, all these places started popping up. He didn't change up. He didn't change, oh, it wasn't like, oh, we're going to do massages. He was like, no, you're coming here for treatment. Like, you want to get better or not? You want to go, there's a bunch of other places for different things. Go ahead. But here's where you're coming to get better for treatment. And, that's what he carried on for 35 years. He never faltered on on what he believed.
So this language of sobriety has been a part of your life for a very long time. And today you're a sober woman. So when did you get sober on this? Because if he was doing this for like 35 years before he passed away, 2 years ago, like you had been hearing sober talk in your home.
I did. And I remember him telling me, because my whole thing was like, oh, I have ADHD and I want to take Adderall because it helps me. And, somebody had given it to me in high school. And I was like, it helps me get through
Like,
school.
this is amazing.
Yeah, I was like, what am
Right.
I doing? I'm like, I'm taking this. I can't focus. And so he was always like, he was really against it. But I still, I was in college at that point, and I was like, let me try it, whatever. A couple years into it, I was like, oh, if I take a little more, I can stay up later. And I knew, like you said, from it being in my house, both of my parents were sober. Like, they went to AA, they were very involved. I knew, but I knew I was like still managing. And once I realized, like, wait a second, I'm taking more than my prescription, which most people I don't even think would even realize or care about because they just don't even notice.
Yeah.
But I realized, I was like, wait, I'm taking more. And then, I realized I was just kind of sad. And I knew I was getting out of control. Like, I just knew it. I knew that I was headed for a bad situation. And I called my dad and I said, Dad, I think I need, I think I'm drinking too much and taking too much Adderall. And he said, "Oh, we'll go to some meetings." But I was scared that I was going to have like a heart attack or something. I was like, "No, I think I need treatment." So he sent me away, and the fact that he owned a treatment center and had to pay out of his pocket to put me, in a place, I was like, I felt so bad, but I was also so grateful that I think that helped me too, in my sobriety, because I felt like, how could I do this knowing, I guess it doesn't. The disease of addiction doesn't discriminate whether you know or you don't know. It's hitting you no matter what. So I think, even though I knew it and I probably should have known better, I did know better. I ended up in the same situation, and I couldn't, I had to get better, and I did. And it wasn't, I don't want to say it wasn't that hard. It was difficult because it was like part of it was embarrassing for me, because I felt stupid.
Why
But
was it embarrassing for you?
because it's different to know about it than to go through it. Like, I even didn't know, I think there was like a part of my parents that wanted to keep me like not so involved. Like I worked at transitions here and there, but my mom had been like, and my mom had a relapse during this time, and she's very open about it. It's not like it's private, but I say that because I had given her an Adderall, like, and I just didn't even know. Now I know you can't take anything. Like if somebody's in sobriety, if somebody's in recovery, you don't give them anything. And I was like, yeah, you're taking Adderall. Like it was so stupid, but you don't know the depths of it unless you go through it yourself.
You know that I can relate to that, like with my mom too. My mom was an addict, and my mom has recently passed away in this past February, and it's okay, but it's amazing what you learn, like when you actually have to walk in the shoes. And I don't want to say their shoes, but like when you start walking in the shoes, right? And you're like, oh shit, like this is what it feels like to be so low that you feel like you can't live without this. Or that you need to get help, and that embarrassment. I think that embarrassment looks different for everybody. That's why I asked you like which part of it embarrassed you.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like it's crazy because when other people tell me, I'm like, that they're embarrassed, I'm like, don't be embarrassed. I'm not. Nobody's judging you. But I felt like coming from a family where I should know better, I was embarrassed that I didn't do better.
Mm. Why did your dad decide to send you to a different treatment center?
I think because it was a conflict of interest with the therapists. The therapists they've been my therapist since I was born. So it was,
Right. And they work with your parents.
yeah. And then I did go to transitions afterwards, like for sober living for like 4 months, and it was the best thing I ever did. I mean, I feel like I learned more there than I ever did. Transitions is more like reality based treatment. So we live in apartments, and you live, it's a little more freedom. Like you're not locked down, and you kind of learn how to integrate back into society, which is important for people like us because I can learn how to not drink. But the second I get something, somebody hurts my feelings or whatever, I'm looking for the next thing to make me feel better.
I mean, and that's kind of what happened with my mom. Like I remember when my mom went to treatment the first time, like the day she got out, it was like she went right back into her previous setting with all of her previous triggers. And I don't know, like I'm not her, and I'll never have an opportunity to ask her this, but like I don't know what that was like for her. I don't know if she was equipped to handle that reality.
Yeah, because how can you? Yeah, it's hard. And I love what you said too about, not knowing, like there are things that my mom, that I found out later about my mom or my dad, and I'm like, well, but I thought you were perfect. And I was judging and being like, well, I don't judge many people, but I'm like, you're my mom. How could you do that? You know? Now that I'm in a position, say in a relationship or what, I'm like, oh my gosh, I totally understand why she did that.
So, how old were you when you went to treatment?
I was It was 2014. I think I was
Okay.
29, 30.
So your dad saw you get sober.
Yeah, I was sober for
Yeah.
7 years before he died, 6 years.
When my mom passed, it was my first like big thing that I went through as a sober person. Like, and I was just coming up on my 2 years of sobriety in February. So that was like the first major life situation that I dealt with as a sober person. And I will say that there was a tremendous amount of support. Like I doubled up on going to meetings for a bit. And I was met with a lot of support from people who were like, I remember my first big, like, hard life experience or like loss in the family or loss of a loved one as a sober person. And I can't tell you how supported I felt like within the sober community.
It's amazing. They'll show up to your house. They'll
I
do anything.
seriously,
They
seriously.
call you every day. I mean, it's a great. I mean, I feel like people who aren't even sober should be sober just
I
because
always think that. I'm like, a 12-step program, it's like a program for living, and everybody needs to do one.
they should go after high school. You should be mandated to go to rehab for a year. No, maybe and then you can go to college and figure out what you want to do. Because I know had I gone to treatment first, I probably would have done life a little bit differently.
Okay, so all those years recording music, performing, just being the star that you are, what was that like? So like, and how did that overlap? Like, you're taking Adderall, right? And you're out there singing, performing, dancing. What was that life like for you? Because it sounds like a big party, like, and it sounds like a lot of fun, TBH.
I mean, it was like it, and there was a while when it was manageable. You know, do a little cocaine here. Have I mean, I still acted like a lunatic. People thought I was like out of my mind no matter what. But that was drunk, sober. You know, like it was fun for a while. You know, it was fun until I abused my privileges and realized that I may have taken it a little too far. But it was the most. It was so fun. I had a great time recording music. I mean, I have stories for days, with other recording artists. I mean, I liked drugs. I liked partying. My cousins I feel like it's in my blood. I don't know if my cousins are Eddie and Alex Van Halen. I just feel like that stuff runs in your blood. Like my mom's that way, like we just like the party. We like, to be wild. It was fun for a while.
At what point does it stop being fun? Like, you mentioned that you were abusing your privileges. Like, what does that mean? And like, what's the context of that?
For me, the hangover got really bad. you know, I, my behavior was like really bizarre. Like the people that I chose to spend time with or give my attention to or my energy to, you know, I realized were like draining me. And I was just, I got like sad because I was finding myself, for me, it was mostly relationship, like it was the men that I was choosing, and it just the life it became very lonely. Like, yeah, it was fun, but like at the end of the day, everybody went home to their families, or like, you know, I feel like I always used to think that about like my dancers, and like, I was like, they all get to go home to their family, and here I am like alone. I felt very alone.
I think that everybody's interpretation of like their rock bottom is so different, right? Like, I personally don't feel like I had a low bottom. I feel like I had a high bottom. I think a lot of people, and every time I talk about sobriety publicly, Joelle, and I know that you do this a little bit for yourself as well, but every time I do, like, I get an influx of messaging of like, how do you know? Like, how do you feel? Like, like, how did you know? Or I think I have a problem and I'm not sure. And one of the things that I always come back to is like that it's a self-diagnosed disease, right? Like, and if you think you have a problem with it, like, you most likely should take a closer look. Not that you do have a problem, but maybe you should like pay attention to your relationship with alcohol or substance.
And when I realized, like, somebody had said something to me, like, hey, I think, one of my friends said something to me, and I was like, no, I can stop. And then I realized too, I mean, which is probably the biggest thing out of, anything that I said about my, why I got there, like, I couldn't stop. I was like, I'll stop taking Adderall tomorrow.
And tomorrow would come.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't fucking stop for 5 minutes. I couldn't. I needed the Adderall to go get the prescription of Adderall. I mean, I literally couldn't function. I became so dependent on something, and I was so tired. Oh, I know what it was. I know what happened. I was at my building in LA, and I must have been going out somehow. There's like an entrance where like you can walk in, but it's like still outside. You walk through this like courtyard or whatever. I fell asleep outside. My roommate found me and brought me inside, and then the next day showed me a picture, and I was like, oh no, bitch, like there's something wrong. Like you fell asleep outside in the middle of the day. I was so like, I couldn't believe, I didn't remember. I didn't understand what happened. And I was like, all right, I think you're taking it too far.
Okay, so you decided that you needed help.
With the help of a friend, one of my friends had said something to me, and I was like, well, do you think I need to go away? And she said, yeah. And I trusted her. I knew that she wouldn't tell me that if there wasn't a reason. I just knew it. I knew it. As much as I came to scream, I cried. I didn't want to go, but I didn't really fight it. I cried and I was like, but 30 days is so long. But I knew in my heart, I was like, you got to go.
I mean, that's what this whole podcast is right? That deepest inner knowing. And like when I pitched this show, I'm like, that's such a beautiful thing, right? Coming into your deepest inner knowing for the most part. Like sometimes it's not the beautiful thing. Sometimes it sucks and it's ugly and it's terrifying and it's the nightmare that you didn't want to wake up, like that you just all you want to do is wake up to. Sometimes that deepest inner knowing is like the dark night of the soul before you come to the light again.
And I'm so grateful for it because you know what I realized in those moments too is like talking about really knowing. I was like, I've spent my whole life, even though I've been selfish in a lot of ways, like draining money and stuff like that, you know, I took care of everybody else. Like my main concern, I never took care of like whatever was hurting me, or what was going on inside of me. And I was like, I deserve that first step. With that first step for me was like a huge realization for my self-esteem. Like it made me feel like, you deserve a chance to work on you.
I want to take a minute to thank our sponsors, Sana Skin Studio. The best way for me to describe Sana is that it feels like coming home. Unlike traditional facials, Sana's facials are rooted in education, and I love this so much. Every experience I've had at Sana has been a chance to learn more about my skin and its needs. I love that the facials are effective while also being accessible enough to be a monthly ritual rather than a yearly splurge. I'm honored to be able to provide our audience with a promo code. Use the code THEKNOGLOW for $25 off of your first facial at Sana when booking via sanaskinstudio.com. When your dad passed away in 2020, I mentioned that you and I are very similar in how we view our relationships with our fathers. Like you, I am really close with my dad, and I always recall you being close with yours. Like even if we weren't like super tight, even then I still knew that you were really tight with your dad. And I know that grief looks different for everybody. What did his passing mean for you and your family, and how did you guys cope with that?
It was very hard. It's still, I mean, just even you saying that, like my eyes are tearing, like some days are harder than others. Some days, like I have it more together than others, but, I knew he was sick, you know, but my dad's been sick on and off for years. He had this issue, that issue. And, so when he got diagnosed with cancer, I guess I was in such denial, even though he was walking around with an oxygen tank. Like when I look back at pictures, I'm like, how could you not see? He looked sick, but he was so tough. Like he always just showed up. He always just laughed. He always was, you know, um, it came as a shock because it happened, it wasn't like he was sick in hospice. He went to sleep that night. Everything was fine. And then woke up and then, my mom was talking to, whatever. And then she said he laid back down to lay down and she just closed his eyes. And so we were all like, I mean, even though we knew maybe it was coming in a few months, it was a huge shock. I mean, my family fell apart. Like he was, as much as I thought I was the glue, because I think him and I are very similar in person. My mom and my brother are very similar with their personalities, but my dad and I are very like, we want everybody to get along. We want you know, it felt like, because then now instead of being four, it was three, and there's one of me and two. It felt like my family fell apart. We all stood up for each other, and we all got super. We've all always been close. Like being close in my family has never been. I'm very close to my brother. I'm very close to my mom, but my dad. It's very hard still. My mom. We're all having a really hard time, and it's been 2 years.
I'm so sorry, Joelle. I'm just so sorry for your loss. And I know that it's so hard because there's only so much another person can say or do, but I want you to know that I see you. And, I just see your energy, and when you speak, I feel your dad's energy too. So, what is your favorite memory of him?
Thank you. And also, that's what helps me at work is I feel so close to him. That's why I like to be there. He used to drive around with this. I mean, this is like one of my favorite. He just liked to play jokes all the time. Like he had this goblin that he would put in my room. Like so, I'd go home and
A
I'd
goblin?
yeah, it was a little goblin from Halloween. And it was like
Yeah.
it looked crazy, and I would go home and I'd go into my bed and I'd open the sheet and I'd scream because I'd see this. It was like this is just how he was. I love that. I can't think of like one particular memory, but just like he loved to have fun. He loved to drive in the car and wear crazy outfits. For Halloween, he dressed up like a genie. He just brought so much joy to like everything he did. So my dad, over the years had kind of gotten out of AA meetings a little bit because, busy in life and whatever. And probably a couple years before he died, he started going back, you know? Um, and it was rough for us financially for a little while. He felt really down, felt like a failure. Business was rough, all this stuff. And I just remember going to this meeting, and literally every meeting we would go to, but there was one specifically that was a birthday meeting. And I mean, I'm telling you, 6 out of 10 people that got on the podium to speak said, and I want to thank Lee Barshan, you saved my life. Or I want to, I see Lee Barshan. And the joy that it brought me to see him be connected back to AA, to see him be filled with love and appreciation because he was so down. He was starting to get sick, and it just. I mean, that made me so happy because I felt like, okay, good. Now you know how great you are. Like people are telling you, like, I know that that's not the only way to feel great, but I just feel like he needed to hear it for him. I think you forget as time goes. And I think he didn't know what kind of impression he had on the world.
How did your life start to change from that point? Like I know that your dad was like the caretaker of the family. And you talked about having to like start over. And so how did your life begin to change from that point on?
We realized we were only left with like a life insurance policy, and but the company was being run by his business partner. And, I got to a point where I was like, all right, how am I going to take care of my mom? She's 75 or 70 years old at the time. Am I going to tell her to go back to work? Like, I can't do that. She's lived this life beyond her wildest dreams. I'm not going to send her. So I realized, like, what am I going to do? I went into the office and I saw what was going on, and I was like, well, this isn't really being run to the best of its ability. Like, maybe I can take this and, bring it back to life, bring it back to what it was, but a better version of it. And that's when I started going to work and just really trying to, not only, I mean, listen, when I started going there, I felt that connection to my dad, which to me was so important to me. I was like, I can't, because we were going to sell the company to the business partner or to somebody else. And I was like, my mom and I had this big thing. I was like, we're not selling the company. Like, give me a chance to do it. We have I started working at a clothing store. I had to be there at a certain time. I was responsible and I did a good job, but it was like, I felt like I was working and working and I couldn't pay my bills, like I had to adjust my life dramatically. I moved out of my apartment. I moved in with my mom, but then I was like, once I got to transitions, I was like, I can do this, and my mom was like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah. And so we did it. And then I just literally, my whole life changed in a matter of like one day, and had to go to work every day. And
what were you thinking going into this without having any experience? Like, holy shit.
No, I'm delusional. I was like, oh, this is going to be easy.
No, you did not. You're like, yeah, sure. No, cakewalk.
I was like, it's fine. I was like, we've been doing this for so many years. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do. Like, they just show up. Like, and then I got there, and like the first day, the first couple of days, it was okay.
Like, yeah, hey, yes, hey, everybody, hey.
And then I was like, wait, what? We have to do payroll? We have no money?
Payroll. You're like, what's that? Wait, what?
What's payroll? How do we do that? Do we write checks? We were still writing checks.
How did you learn how to do all these things?
So I went in there. There was 3 patients. We used to have 60 patients at a time.
Okay. Okay.
So 3 people were in treatment. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's not a lot. That's not enough to keep your business going.
No, we had more staff than we had
Which
patients.
sucks, right? Like you're like, yes, we need more sick people. You're like, no, we want to heal the people, but you need the sick people. There's only 3 sick people in your healing facility. Like you're gonna need more sick people.
Right. But they're everywhere. It's just you got to find them,
Right.
you know?
Right.
But yeah, no, I don't want more sick people. I just wanted to find the ones that didn't have help yet, you know?
Right. Yes, I got it.
But so I was like, what do I know? So I was like, I started going to different detoxes. You know, I focused on the patients that were there. Like there was a guy who called me and asked for treatment. The girl came in, there was, you know, she was actually the 3rd patient. So I was like, oh my gosh, this looks so bad. But I just, you know, at the end of the day, people want to feel loved. They want to feel cared for. They want good, like, they want good care. You know,
Yes.
so I don't think if there were 65 people there and she didn't get the attention she got, she would have probably hated it. But the girl who came in, you know, I went there. She was the only female. I would go there. I would spend time with them, and then, you know, I would run to detoxes. I would just make phone calls. I would call everybody I knew. By the next week, I had 15 patients in there, and then, which was great because I was like, oh, this is perfect. But then the staff hadn't been used to working because they had been so low for so many months with COVID and everything that now the staff didn't want to do anything.
So you're having to manage staff and patients and wear all these hats that you had not ever worn.
I've never had to worry about, and they're looking at me. I'm coming in as my father's daughter. What experience does she have? I knew her when she was a child, you know, and then they have to.
She's the new CEO, right?
Yeah. And at the time, I probably didn't deserve, like, you know, I don't want to say that, but like, you know, I didn't work for that position until I got there. But, you know, I didn't have the experience. So I was like, oh my gosh. But, you know, I would pray and pray and pray. And I would, you know, ask questions. I would ask whoever I knew, you know, and I went in with confidence. I felt confident. I treated people like people. You know, I treated the staff well. I didn't come in there like, hey, you're going to do this. And I just said, hey, you know, do you mind how, you know, I tried to be, you know, as non-threatening as I could. You know, I wasn't coming in there to destroy everything. I wanted it to be better. I expressed that. I had, you know, staff meetings. Hey, listen, I know, you know, this may be weird because you know, I'm coming from a situation where I don't really know everything. Please, anything you can do to help me, you know, I just want this to work.
You're in a unique position in that you're coming into a treatment center to not only better the lives of people who are sick and suffering, but you have the humility and the backing of having worked the program yourself. So even when you come into a situation, you're like, I don't know how to run this business. You have a very key trait that not all people in leadership positions do have.
And it was scary because I don't have the license. You know, I'm telling doctors what to do and people with licenses, you know? So it's like, but I think you're right. I think there's a lot to be said when you come in and when you're honest and authentic. I think people respect that. Like I could say, hey, I don't know everything, but don't worry. I'm going to make sure we figure it out. I'm going to make sure we take care of it. You know, and I made everybody feel safe, even when I didn't feel safe myself. You know, like I just knew it would be okay. I had the faith. I believed in myself. I believed in the company. I believed in the people that you know, because I did have to go in there and fire some people. You know, I did things that people never thought I would do because, you know, people had been there 20 years. I brought in new people. You know,
Those are hard decisions to make, Joelle.
Nikki, I spent the first couple months, I cried so hard because I was like, you know, but they were there for my dad and they were this and they were, you know, it was very hard to let people go. But I was like, why, you know, when you look at like being financially responsible, because I never have been, when you look at that, you see like, you know, does this make sense? Like, what am I, like, it's you and your salary or this company. Like you're put in a position of like huge responsibility.
Have you completely put your entertainment career behind you?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel? And how do you feel about that?
I miss it. Like I watch movies and stuff and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I miss acting especially. I miss making music. I do miss a part of the lifestyle. But I also know that when I was doing that, I wanted something else. Like I want something more. I want not more. I'm not saying you can't get more that way, but I want something different. I want a family. I want kids. I want a husband. That's what I want now. I don't want to be like living in a different, or like, what am I going to find a husband who's going to come travel with me for, 2 weeks to film a movie? Like, how will they work? Like, I mean, I miss it. I do miss it a lot. I miss the creativity.
When I stopped dancing, it was really, really, really hard for me. Like I think what I missed more than anything was like the camaraderie and like the performance, like those two things, like the camaraderie of other performers, right? And getting to share in that like mutual high and the actual performance itself. And I think in life you start to find that you get that feeling in different ways. Like today, it's now for me, it's like hosting a great podcast, like having amazing one on one conversations, or watching my kids excel at something. And it's not the same. It's not like the same as when I was on stage. And even when I was a teacher, it wasn't the same. Like I could watch my dancers on stage, but it was never like it could be amazing, but it was still nothing like doing it yourself. But I think that when you are looking and you are open to it, you can find that feeling in other like normal everyday experiences too.
Oh, totally. And I think you're right. There's something about that camaraderie and stuff, like when you go to dance rehearsal, and stuff. It's so fun. And the type of people that you get to hang with, and, like the friend, like we would have never known each other if it wasn't for that, and, even though we don't talk that often, like you're still one of my favorite people. Like I care about you deeply. I think, I respect you. I think I'm so proud. Like when I'm listening to you talk, I'm super emotional. I'm like, gosh, you're so good at this.
When I look back at my life, I'm like, okay, I did so many different things. I pivoted so many times, and like you've had to like pivot tremendously. And it's like, okay, what don't I know? I don't know a lot of things, right? But what I do know, I can apply to this situation. So like you think about your creativity, and even when I'm just like listening to you talk, and we touched on camaraderie, like you talk about having your staff meetings. Like there's camaraderie in that, right? There's like being like, I don't know how to do this. Let's all work together. This is what the goal is. Let's go make it happen, team. Like, let's go. So you're doing that. Like you see me from the outside, you're like, you're so talented and whatever, like hosting these conversations or being a mom or whatever, but like you're doing your version of that at transitions.
Thank you. And I know that, but it is a different it's a different feeling. Like it's different, it's a because it's mental health. You have to be so careful,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
would imagine.
like there's a fine line. It's like, it's almost scary sometimes because you're dealing with people's lives, like I feel, and we have the most fun too. Don't get me wrong. We have so much fun. I love my staff. I love the patients, but you have to be like this, literally, it's scary.
How has being sober allowed you to move through like the difficult times in life, but also like in the workspace?
So, like for me, the most important things that I learned getting sober, which was like, first of all, this one was really hard, but that the world didn't revolve around me.
Isn't it shocking?
I couldn't believe it.
I know.
I still sometimes I'm like, are you sure?
Are
You're,
you sure? You're like, I could have sworn.
yeah. But like, that's helped me.
Girlfriend, you don't have to tell me twice. I know, I know.
Like every time somebody reacts, I don't have to react. That was another big one for me. I feel like sobriety teaches you how to live.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally, sobriety teaches you how to live. And I feel like that was one of the biggest lessons. Like, don't take stuff personal. Don't react. That if it wasn't for those things that sound like two little things, like my whole world could turn upside down by just, if you're having a bad day, I'm like, oh, she must be mad at me. Like it must be something I did. Like, girl, nobody's even thinking about you. Like, it has nothing to do with me, And that was a huge lesson for me. I feel like if it wasn't for those things, I can't imagine being able to have the life skills that I have now.
Do you ever want to go back out? Like, do you ever want to go back out and start drinking or using again?
I always wonder, like, oh, could I ever? I'm like, I could drink. That's what I think. every addict. I could drink. I'm like, I never had a problem with alcohol, really. I just drank like 3 bottles of wine a day. It wasn't I see people drinking and stuff, and I'm like, oh, that looks fun on vacation or whatever.
I know.
But do I want to go? I played the tape out, and I changed my mind faster than I even thought about it. I'm like, nope. I'm so much, even in my worst days, like you couldn't, I mean, I say that now, I know nothing, you never say never, nothing's impossible, but like it would be very hard to get me to go back out.
Everybody to an extent has some form of like how they soothe, right? Outside of themselves. Like it takes a lot of self-awareness to eliminate the need to self-soothe out, like to soothe outside of yourself, right? So some people like work out like maniacs, and they're addicted to working out and it's never enough to be like, they're never fit enough. Like they always want to be more fit and more fit. And then it's shopping, it's the things, and it's eating, and it's sex. It's all these things that like soothe outside of ourselves. And it takes, and I think we all do it to an extent. Like some cases are obviously like way more extreme than others, but we all have some form of it. And it requires a tremendous amount of self-awareness to like be like, okay, like what problem is that solving for me? Because it's usually not solving a problem, and it's usually like satiating a temporary feeling.
And it's usually making the problem worse.
Yeah.
Right? Like if I'm anxious and then I buy something and I know that like I am out of control, all I'm going to do is get more anxiety around it, because I'm like,
right.
Oh my gosh, how
totally.
much is the bill? But that's the same thing with drinking, right? Like
right.
You think it's going to make us feel better, but it's a depressant.
Yeah.
So it makes us feel worse.
So what has been the most important factor in your recovery?
To tell the truth.
Amen. We could end on that note, because to tell the truth. And it's so crazy that you're saying that, Joelle, because like you were saying something before and I was going to ask you, and then we started talking about something else, but I'm like, how has your honesty changed since you've been sober?
So, I mean, and I know, like, I feel like I'm like speaking, so highly of myself, but I've always been a pretty honest person.
I was reflecting on that too about you. I was like, I feel like she's always been pretty honest.
I've always been pretty open, but I feel like my feelings I would keep in a little bit, like to pacify or to, to make somebody else feel better or easier. I didn't want to be annoying or a burden. I just say exactly how I feel, even if it's annoying. Even when I was in treatment, like whatever I did that was wrong, you're not supposed, listen, my parents met close, to where they went to treatment. So, you couldn't tell. I'm like, oh, I find my husband here, like that's what I was looking for when I was in treatment. And, anything, if I even thought a guy was cute, I would tell him myself. I would say, I think this is, because I just wanted to get it all out. I feel like what saves me every single day in and day out is just being completely honest. And then I feel good. I feel, I get irked by people who aren't authentic. Like it irks my soul, which I don't know why. It's so important to me to just be who I am. Like that's how I feel like if you have that, if you can do that, it's hard, but for me, it's been life-changing.
Joelle, thank you so much for sharing that with me. This podcast was brought to you by Sana Skin Studio. Be sure to use my code, TheNoGlow, for $25 off of your first facial at Sana when booking via sanaskinstudio.com. More than a skin studio, Sana is a movement towards healthier skin and self-love. Thank you so much for listening to The Know. If you loved this episode, go ahead and share it with a friend. Words are so powerful, and someone may need to hear what we covered today. And if you really loved this episode, please take a moment to rate the show and leave a review. Your comments are so important and valued, and they give other listeners insight on what to expect on The Know. You can connect with me personally via Instagram at Nikki Sap Spo and The Know with Nikki Spo. My hope for you today is that you are fearless in looking inward so that you can be your highest, most authentic self and go after the life of your dreams.